Hey there, we're back and we're into the modern world. We're now talking about domain names and social media, but we're not going to tell you how to run your social media accounts in this. This is part of the legal basis of the music industry, or the legal basis of the music business to be exact. And we're going to talk about domain names and social media from a legal perspective. And then we'll throw in a little bonus at the end of this class. I'm going to talk to particularly our American students about a American law called the right to publicity. All right, so let's start with the very basic things. Most artists still want to have a website. There is all sorts of alternatives to having a website these days, obviously, but it's probably important to still have a website. Even if you don't think having a website is vitally important to you, it might be a good idea to ensure that nobody else puts up a website in your name. So it's probably a good idea to get at least some of the key extensions of your artist name as a website, or at least own the domain name. It's cheap. Domain names are not expensive. You may as well purchase all the relevant ones if you can. Assuming, of course, that it's still available and that nobody has already registered your band name or your artist name as a website. Now, it used to be that the .com was probably the most important website domain name to get. Maybe the .org, maybe the .net, but these days you can get all sorts of fun domain names, .music or .tour, and lots of other variations. So depending what your strategy is on the internet, whether you feel like you need to have all of those different domain extensions, they're not really expensive. You can pick up most of them for $9 or $10 for a year. Yeah, that might add up if you've got 20 different extensions that you think, oh, I'd better have just about everything. It starts to get a little bit expensive, but it's a good way of marking out your territory. So depending on how seriously you think about domain names and whether you use them creatively, like a special domain name for a tour or something like that, it's probably worth registering those. And it's, as I'm sure you're all very aware, very easy to do. But let's be realistic about what a domain name registration gives you. All that a domain name registration gives you is the right to occupy that little piece of cyberspace. It doesn't give you any exclusive rights. So if you're a band and you think, oh, it's a bit expensive to register a trademark, I know what we'll do. We'll register myband.com, whatever your band's name is. That should cover us. Well, it probably doesn't. All it means is that you're entitled to occupy that little bit of cyberspace noted as yourbandname.com. It doesn't give you any exclusivity over the use of your band name. That's what trademark is for. So that's all it means. It won't prevent another artist using your band name or that artist's name in the real world. Just the fact that you've got the .com doesn't actually count for anything. That's the job of trademark. All right, so we'll move on from domain names fairly quickly, but my suggestion is get the important ones if you can. Let's move on to social media. Now, claiming your artist or your band name and the page on the various social media platforms is always a good idea, although again, it doesn't give you any legal rights. Just because you've got the name of your band on Facebook or Instagram as your extension, all it says is that you own that page on that site. It doesn't mean that you can prevent anyone else using that name in the real world. The main reason you want to get that before anyone else is to stop them from getting it and causing confusion with your page or your brand. You don't want people thinking that your page or a particular page on Facebook or Instagram or a particular account on Instagram is yours when it's not yours. You want that to be associated with you. So even if you think that Twitter sucks, and there's probably a few of you out there that think that Twitter sucks and others that love it, it's probably worth at least registering or grabbing that name and that page on all of the platforms if you can, even if you don't intend using them. If somebody has taken your name on a social media page, there's not much you can do to stop them having that. They're entitled to get in first and grab that name. If you've got a trademark, you could use that as leverage and say that their use of your trademark as a domain name or as a social media handle is actually a deceptive and misleading use of your registered trademark. So you might be able to use trademark as leverage to get someone to give up a Facebook page or an Instagram account or something like that. You might be able to use that, but it's a kind of annoying and painful process, particularly as finding that person and actually tracking them down and serving them with legal papers or something is A, going to be expensive, and B, it might actually just be really difficult to do. So my suggestion is get in first. Once you've settled on a band name or an artist name, grab all the territory you can, even if you don't intend using it. All right, so that's a very brief summary of the legal side of domain names and social media. That's not how to do social media marketing. There's an entire area that we'll be talking about in this and other courses in relation to marketing. So look forward to that. But in the meantime, from a legal perspective, do a land grab while you can and make sure you're protected. Okay, now here's our little bit of bonus content. And this is primarily for US audiences. America has this thing called the right to publicity. It's a US law. It doesn't apply in every state. It's known as a bit of a celebrity law. It was first introduced, I believe, I'm not an American lawyer, but my recollection is that it was first introduced in America in the state of California. Surprise, surprise. And it was done when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor. Now, what this law, this right to publicity in the US says, is that it gives a person the right to control the commercial use of their identity. Now, identity can take a lot of forms, as we'll see. And this is a state law, and different states have adopted this law. Now, it's not identical in state by state, but what it effectively does in the states that have this right to publicity is it prevents the unauthorized commercial use of an individual's name or likeness, their image, the way they look, giving that person or their estate, and that's an interesting addition, an exclusive right to license the use of their identity for commercial purposes. Now, if you're not in America, you have to rely on some other law. You have to rely on defamation if they're using your name in a way that damages your reputation. Or you have to rely on consumer laws, like in Australia it's called deceptive and misleading conduct under the consumer law. So you have to find some other way of protecting your image and your likeness or some other personal characteristic that identifies you. In America, in these states, you're able to say, well, hang on a minute, that is my identity and I have a right to control the use of my identity. Now, it's a commercial use of your identity. So, of course, this law is useful for people whose identity has a high commercial value. If you're a Kardashian, if you're a super sports star, if you're a rock star, if you're a famous actor, your image, your likeness is more likely to have commercial value. And this law is there to protect that commercial value. So it could assist an artist like yourself when your image is being used. We've said that you don't have copyright in your face. You don't even have copyright in a photograph of you unless you happen to own the copyright in that photo. If it's somebody else's photograph of you, a paparazzi photo, for example, you don't own copyright in that photo. So how do you protect the use of your image or your likeness? So this is how this law operates. It is really perceived for that reason as a celebrity law, or a law that protects the image and likeness of high-profile people. So that has enormous value. It doesn't matter whether you're a movie star or a sports star or a famous musician. Your image has value, and the use of your image in association with products or services or on merchandise or anything like that clearly has a commercial value. So you want to be able to protect that. Now, the problem with other people using your image without your permission is that it actually devalues your image. You don't get paid if some company runs an ad using a paparazzi photo of you and you're photographed with a particular brand of beer sitting on your table or something, and they go, "Whoa, it's just a paparazzi shot, what can you do?" Well, under this law, which is relatively new, you're able to say, well, you're using my image for commercial purposes without my permission, and I can stop you from doing that. Now, it goes beyond the use of your actual physical image. There's an interesting case, Bette Midler, who some of you would, I hope, be familiar with. She's a Grammy Award-winning singer. She's, I believe, an Oscar Award-winning actress. But she has a very distinctive voice. And some of you are probably thinking, hey, I've got a really distinctive voice. Whenever people hear me sing, they recognise that it's me. Bette Midler was asked to sing a jingle for a car company. I think I've got the facts right of this case. Check me if I'm wrong. I think it was a car company, and they wanted her to sing a jingle. Her agent naturally said, Bette Midler doesn't do jingles. So the car company went off and said, all right, well, that's fine. We'll just find a session singer that sounds like her. It's a very distinctive voice. The moment people heard that session singer, they went, okay, well, that's Bette Midler. Wow, that's cool. She's endorsing that brand of motor vehicle. She wasn't endorsing that brand of motor vehicle, and the court took a pretty dim view of it. And I think particularly because they actually asked her to do it, she said no. And so they said, all right, well, we'll go and find a sound-alike. So there's been some really interesting cases in that area. The incredibly wonderful and talented artist Tom Waits, I believe, had a similar case because he has a very distinctive voice, and a brand tried to do a sound-alike of a Tom Waits voice for their ad as well. There's been quite a few of these cases now. Now, this is a really interesting area because it also extends to dead celebrities who are sometimes referred to kind of weirdly as celebs. So it could be used to protect the use of the image of artists such as Michael Jackson or Prince or David Bowie or Tupac or Jimi Hendrix. There's so many. Sadly, there's so many incredible artists that are no longer with us. So that right to publicity could actually impact on the use of your artist name even after you are no longer with us. Now, I'm hoping that most of you are around for a long time and your estate doesn't need to use this law to protect your image after you've left us. Try hanging around and making some fantastic music for us in the meantime. Now, this area of law is only in the US at this stage. There isn't a European version of it. There is not an Australian version of it. And so in those other countries, we have to rely on some other area of law, as I said, like defamation or fraud or something like that. But it's an interesting one and it's a growing area. And I would strongly suggest that there is going to be a lot of right to publicity cases emerging around music in the years to come. All right, so to wrap up this short but sweet lesson, your intellectual property goes beyond copyright in your works. Your intellectual property goes beyond your trademark. Think of things like your online positioning, your social media handles, or even the use of your voice or some other identifying characteristic as part of your intellectual property. Most artists don't even realize the amount of IP that they have, and it's really important to ensure that you protect all of your IP, not just your songs and your recordings. So with that, that pretty much wraps up this class, and the next one is where I will see you, I hope, in a few minutes, or next week. Whenever you're ready to do the next class, anytime that suits you, I'll be here. All right, see you later.